Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, this Sunday, Sikhs across Indiana vote in another Khalistan referendum. It's a very big day, and we'll look at some of the events, both good and bad, happening as we head towards the Sunday the 16th. And a shocking assault outside of Haryana, Gurdwara this month has turned into something a lot bigger. A police complaint, a community protest, and now solidarity messages arriving even from as far away as Azerbaijan. And the Godi media wants you to believe Sikhs are somehow taking over Punjab from Hindus. Well, we'll check that claim against the actual numbers. And we mark a special feature today, the heroic Sikh women and their wonderful history that rarely or is rarely told about. From a warrior who turned back an army to the last queen of the Sikh empire, and loads of present day heroes of the female gender representing the Sikh community. Do stay tuned for that. All this and more on today's show. And of course, loads of your comments at the end of the show. So do stay tuned for that. Right, let's get underway. So quite a lot to get through today. And of course, Sunday is the big day. Sunday, the 16th of August. And of course, Sikhs right across central Indiana will get the chance again to cast a symbolic vote at the Richard G. Lugar Plaza. That's in downtown Indianapolis. It is, of course, the latest round of Sikhs for Justice ongoing Khalistan referendum. And it is, of course, worth being pretty clear about what it all is, since mainstream coverage does try to sort of muddy the water, particularly when Hindutva can get their claws into it. It is, of course, yes, it is a non-binding, symbolic vote with no legal force in India, the US or wherever. But it changes in reality. Yes, it, at least on the face of it, has no legal strength to change borders, create countries, etc. But it doesn't matter. The voting is actually overseen by what SFJ, Sikhs for Justice, call the Punjab Referendum Commission. And that is a panel made up of independent experts on direct democracy. And their stated job is to supervise the question, the voter eligibility, registration and the counting, so that the exercise does meet recognise international standards for this kind of symbolic ballot. Yes, it's symbolic, but the fact it is being conducted under normal, democratic, legal protocols and overseen by independent experts means it carries a huge amount of weight, despite the fact it is not legally binding on India. So, what it does do is, of course, and the reason why this is so important is it measures something real. It measures something real that India really will struggle to deny. And India does its absolute best to deny. Because, of course, it measures organised diaspora sentiment. It gauges how does the diaspora, many of whom have literally fled Punjab, how do they feel about an independent Khalistan, an independent Punjab? And, well, it turns out the numbers so far are not small. I mean, even in just the relatively recent ones, in Brampton in 2022, 110,000 people minimum turned out. Calgary saw 55,000 in 2024. Ottawa, 53,000, over 53,000 last November. And even Seattle, a city with a comparatively small Sikh population, saw around 27,000 votes cast back in March earlier this year. So, whatever you think of the politics, it is not a fringe movement, and it is certainly not a fringe turnout. And of course, the wonderful thing about a lot of the lead up to these referendum, these wonderful car rallies, and there's loads of videos on social media, across social media, showing these too, because the build-up has been very much visible on the ground. On the 1st of August, for example, just a few days ago, organisers ran a 5-mile convoy of cars and trucks, flying these wonderful Khalistan flags along Interstate 465 around Indianapolis. It was described as a convoy of American Sikhs ahead of the vote on Sunday. And there's been loads of other convoys, pre-vote flag hoisting ceremonies. They've all become a fixture of these referendum rounds. They're so wonderful to see. And Seattle's March vote, for example, opened with a flag hoisting the very evening before at Renton Gurdwara, with Gurpatwant Singh Pannu himself and other SFJ leaders addressing the gathering directly. But it is a deliberate, visible, community-centred build-up. It's not just sort of a quiet ballot thing going on, behind the scenes. This is a very, very high-profile process, and it's great that it is getting as much coverage across social media, and even to some extent the mainstream media as it is as well. But interestingly, though, in my digging, looking up towards the ballot on Sunday in Indianapolis, Sikhs for Justice appears as having to deal with a little bit of internal issues. Right up to this, of course, this big event on Sunday. A Greenwood-based activist, a guy called Harjap Singh Jappi, apparently has publicly accused J.S. Dhaliwal, he's a close associate of Gurpatnt Singh Panun, of apparently facilitating the arrest of a third organiser, a guy called Manmohit Singh Chahal, who runs a pro-Khalistan media platform and was actively helping with the referendum organisation. Now, Chahal was reportedly detained by US immigration enforcement over an illegal entry allegation and apparently is now being held at a detention centre in Indiana at a town called Brazil. Now, again, it's very hard to get any sort of corroboration or independent confirmation of any of this, particularly the specific accusation against Dhaliwal. So, I just want to sort of mention it in passing, but it is clearly a dispute that's going on, that's playing out publicly on social media. And you guys, obviously, who speak Punjabi, can probably glean a lot more detailed information about this. But ultimately, it's the sort of thing that really we do not want to appear in the public domain. If there are spats, if there are arguments behind the scenes, particularly amongst the organisers, it really must not hit the public domain. It mustn't be argued out publicly on social media, because it really does damage the whole image of a campaign that so far is turning into one of the highest profile events of the year in the US. It's fantastic. Now, also, I did come across this on social media. This is, again, slightly concerning. This guy, he's planning to attend, obviously, a lot of these car rallies and, of course, the referendum on Sunday. And his car was vandalised. His car was, of course, adorned in preparation for these convoys, these car rallies. His car, as you can see, was adorned with Bindranwaleji's images and pro-Khalistan posters and stuff. But, of course, it's been vandalised. You can see the pretty horrific damage. Windows smashed, something sprayed inside, sprayed across his paintwork. It's a pretty serious attack. Apparently happened in Greenwood in Indiana. So, yeah, again, a pretty defiant message. You honestly think you can stop the referendum by this sort of vandalisation, ripping Bindranwaleji's poster, etc.? Yeah, it's a defiant message, but it is concerning. And, of course, the question is, who did this and why? It's very easy to jump to the conclusion. It must have been Hindutva. It must have been, some Hindutva forces up to mischief, up to criminal damage, etc. It's probably not the first time this has happened, sadly. But ultimately, it's sad that it does happen. And it is also worth reminding, of course, that this referendum, it is a process of democracy in a peaceful, democratic nation of the United States, being undertaken by a peaceful, democratic movement. And in our democratic nations, we have the right to go out into public, wave flags, chant slogans, and campaign for pretty much anything that we believe in, obviously within the law. And that is what the Khalistan movement is. Contrast that with those who disagree with it. And that sort of vandalism is very much a manifestation of India and India's attitude towards Western democracy. It hates it. Now, I'm not immediately accusing an Indian or even a Hindutva person. It may be something completely different. It might be a right-wing extremist. But it does potentially at least point some sort of hypothetical finger, and even metaphorically speaking, at the whole of India. Look, this is what India represents. It hates the Khalistan movement so much, it is prepared to sink to violence, to vandalism, violence, intimidation, harassment, and even murder, as we know, of course, in the case of Bhai Najjar. So it's deeply sad to see something like this. And again, it's very hard to know where to point the finger, but we can all come to our own conclusions. But anyway, it is worth remembering that the Indianapolis and the city of Indianapolis and the referendum that's coming up isn't in isolation this week. It is actually the 8th round of this referendum campaign since it began actually here in London back in October 2021. And it's landing the same week that SFJ's General Counsel, Gurpatnt Singh Panun, the man in question, happens to be also, interestingly, publicly sparring with Canada's Public Safety Department over its zero tolerance claims on transnational oppression. Of course, that's a story that I covered in yesterday's show, in fact. So two separate storylines, same organisation, same week almost. A formal government letter answering Panin's complaint, and of course a referendum vote that his own organisation is trying to hold together through all sorts of issues and disputes or whatever. But neither of those two things make the other less real. But together they show an organisation that is having to operate on several fronts at once. It is under pressure from all sides, under real and internal and external pressure. So you've got to really put your hand up in salute to Sikhs for Justice, because of course Gurbakhsh Singh Panin himself is having to be so careful for his own personal safety. The organisation is under so much pressure coming from India and other directions, from local Hindutva forces. So again, to actually undertake a huge organisational event like a referendum, again happening in Indianapolis, you've got to take your hats off to these guys for their courage and their fortitude, their resilience and their determination to keep this referendum campaign going. So well done to those guys. And don't forget, of course, if you're in Indiana this weekend, make sure you and your family go along. As always, it'll be a wonderful family event. Keep smiling, keep flying the Khalistan flags. You can vote whichever way you wish to vote. That is democracy. But certainly, we hope you vote for what we all believe in, which, of course, is the grand concept of a sovereign Khalistan. So anyway, good luck to you guys at the weekend. Hope it all goes well. And do let me know your thoughts. Let me know your reports. If you take any photos, send me some photos, whatever, or even videos. Right, let's move on to Haryana. This is a terrible story, actually. And again, it's a small story that actually has bigger implications, as it turns out. The 7th of August, just a few days ago, Gursimran Singh Mand, he's the national president of the International Anti-Khalistani Terrorist Front. I'd never heard of this organisation, but it's there. It's an anti-Khalistani terrorist front. It is a Y category he himself is a Y category protected figure, known for his outspoken opposition to our movement, the Khalistan movement. Now, this guy, apparently, on the 7th of August, was attacked by a crowd outside the Gurdwara Sri Panjokra Sahib near Ambala in Haryana. And it happened during Gurpurab celebrations. His car windscreen was smashed, he and his son were struck with sticks and swords and hospitalised. So it was a pretty serious attack. And then 2 police officers who tried to intervene, they also were injured. Now, this guy's own account is that he was simply sitting in his car when the crowd swelled and then turned on him. And he told reporters, apparently from his hospital bed, that the crowd had demanded he chant slogans against Modi and the RSS and call for Amritpal Singh's release. So that's his side of the story. But of course, there was another side of the story, and that came from the Sikh community, and they've got their own account of it, which actually tells a very different story. Surprise, surprise. The Haryana Sikh Gurdwara Management Committee has a president, a guy called Jagdish Singh Jinder, and he made a statement publicly, and he said that Mand, this guy, arrived by vehicle, despite the road being closed to traffic for Gurupurab, refused to get out and enter properly. He then sat in his car for around 15 minutes, ignoring Gurdwara protocol during a period of very heavy crowds, and, according then to a former Akali Dal media in charge, quoted in reporting on the incident, used abusive language and brandished weapons when people tried to stop his car. And that is what actually then triggered the confrontation. So this guy wasn't, by all accounts, just sitting peacefully in his car. It looks very much like he deliberately started a confrontation. And local Sikh leaders have formally now submitted a complaint blaming Mand for provoking the Sangat deliberately, rather than being an innocent victim of this situation. So again, 2 sides to the story. I think I can likely believe what the truth of the matter is. Don't forget, this guy is clearly a well-known anti-Khalistan activist, and he goes up to his Gurdwara and starts provoking the Sangat. So what do you think would happen? So again, it's a very clear situation. Anyway, but what happened next is where the story actually becomes a lot more important than just this sort of local scuffle. Police then detained 2 Sikh youths in connection with that assault. And then on Sunday, Sikh community members staged a dharna, that's a sit-in protest, outside the police station, the Panjokra police station, where those two Sikhs were held, demanding that Mand himself be arrested, not just the young men rounded up after the fact. And police have since said that the two detained men were released after questioning. And they admitted that they weren't involved. So they basically arrested two completely innocent young Sikhs and discovered subsequently that they weren't involved in any incident. And that whoever actually was involved, the police said, would face arrest once the investigation concludes. Well, okay, we'll believe that when it happens. The track record of the police in that region is not great, to be honest. Anyway, but here's where the detail that turns this from just a little local news story in Haryana into something actually that now is the reason really I'm talking about it, is because it's gone international. The Baku Initiative Group, BIG, this is a group based in Azerbaijan. It is an advocacy organisation that I've talked a lot about if you're a regular viewer of the show. Because, of course, they have hosted the Khalistan movement in the form of the Sikh Federation International recently. Anyway, so the BIG group, the Baku Initiative Group, this advocacy organisation, have now issued a public statement of solidarity with the Sikh protesters who were gathered outside the Panjokra police station. And they've also called on the Indian government to guarantee equal protection under the law and accountability, due process, and of course protection for Sikh religious spaces. Now, my sort of cynical answer to that is, well, good luck with that appeal, since when has India listened to anybody? But the fact is, it's coming from another nation. It's coming from outside of India once again. So again, it's India's reputation, India's image once again being damaged on the global stage. And it's not the first time that BIG has engaged with Sikh causes, of course, because, as I said, they did host that Sikh Federation International delegation, including Maninder Singh. He's the guy who's been served with the duty to warn notice by the Canadian government. And they hosted that get-together, that convention in Baku back in January, earlier this year. And BIG then since signed a formal agreement on preserving Sikh heritage. So they do have a stake in the game in this. And some Indian security analysts have characterised BIG's growing interest in Khalistan, well, potentially as a calculated piece of Azerbaijan's wider positioning against India. It's a bit of a geopolitical argument that the reason why Azerbaijan have waded into this. And of course, they argue it's tied to Azerbaijan's closer ties with Pakistan and Turkey, and not just a simple principled human rights sort of argument. So again, the critics are saying, well, you're only getting involved because it actually suits your wider, bigger picture geopolitical situation, your alliance with Pakistan, India's arch enemy, and Turkey. But ultimately, it doesn't matter. Whatever Baku's underlying motive is, and at the end of it, it actually doesn't matter. It's what the practical effect is. And the practical effect is the same one that I always talk about. You've got a domestic Indian Gurdwara dispute is now generating international solidarity statements within days. And that's exactly the kind of grassroots to global PR pipeline that is getting India so worried. Because, of course, India wants stories like this buried. They want it contained within Haryana. They don't want this news leaking out. And yet, here you go. You've got an international story that, obviously, I'm talking about here in the UK. But Azerbaijan's talking about it. And what about all the other news outlets that will now be picking up this story, the aggregators, that will then be disseminating this story around the world? So, anyway, a little bit of context on that group that this guy Mand actually leads, the International Anti-Khalistani Terrorist Front. I'm not chuckling. Now, this organisation, or this group, was specifically put together to oppose Khalistani sympathisers within Sikh community spaces. And that's actually precisely why its leader, attending a Gurdwara during a major religious festival, was always going to be provocative. It was always going to be combustible. And it doesn't matter what the exact sequence of, who provoked whom, who started it. The fact that he was there was always going to have predictable consequences, which in itself, what an idiot. Without, if he'd thought about this, he's actually done his own cause greater harm. And on the Baku side, it's also worth noting that the group describes itself as having formal cooperation ties with more than 20 countries and over 25 international organisations. So from the Baku side, the Azerbaijan side, that level of institutional and international reach makes this whole story huge. Just this small Haryana incident is now, as I say, an international story. So a well-networked international NGO doesn't normally weigh in on a single little scuffle at a Gurdwara unless it sees that incident fitting a pattern that is worth publicising. And of course that pattern ties into everything that was discussed in that convention back in January when the Sikh Federation International were there. So this is why they picked it up, and this is why they're broadcasting it wide. It ties into the whole narrative that has gone international. So, as I say, a tiny little situation in Haryana has now made international headlines, which is great for the Khalistan movement. So, I want to talk about this now. Demographics. Demographics has been a word that's cropped up very regularly recently. We have a regular commenter in our comments column, DTST, I think his name is. You know who you are if you're watching, who's taken a lot of time to go to great lengths to talk about the demographics of Sikhs and how it's a weakness, and is questioned. I say it's a he, it might be she, but whoever you are. And this person has really questioned the whole demographic profile of the Sikh community, where it is geographically, etc., etc. But he or she is not the only person who's tried to seize on this argument to try and weaken the Khalistan movement and the Khalistan cause in any form of propaganda. And I'm going to show you a video now where the irony drips large. And I love showing these videos where the irony and the hypocrisy drips large. It is, of course, there's been, on the show, I've talked a lot about the pressure on Sikh demographics, the mass emigration, the low birth rates, of course, relative to other communities. And also feeding into this is this longer term strategy that Hindutva clearly are jumping on to try and dilute the Punjab, that one Indian state where Sikhs hold the majority. So it is worth pausing on this video, which I'm going to show you now. I'll show it in the background as I talk, because obviously because of my technical issues, I can't actually play the audio. But actually, the audio, I think, is in Hindi anyway. And I've had to use a bit of technology to translate it. And it's come from the Gaudiya media outlet Op India, and it's now circulating around. I think it is in the Hindi language. And it pushes a narrative running in the exact opposite direction, that Sikhs are somehow dominating Punjab and pushing Hindus out. Again, I mean, I'm chuckling because it's the sort of the irony. And here it is. This is the video. This is this lady. It's whoever she is, Ritika J. Chandala. She's basically arguing over, I think it's a couple of minutes or three minutes, this video. It's a couple of minutes. This is spread across social media, particularly across Hindutva groups. And it's a simple propaganda piece talking about Khalistani terrorists. Yeah, we've been there before. But she's also arguing that there's a deliberate campaign by Sikhs to push Hindus out of Punjab. And that the countryside is essentially, it's Sikh majority, and they're doing everything they can to push any other religion, particularly Hindus, out. Well, okay, that's the argument being pushed by this lady. So I want to actually, of course, like I always do on the show, I'll say, right, okay, that is your prerogative to argue one way, but it is also my prerogative to present some facts to argue against you. Because, of course, quite often these propaganda pieces are just nonsense. They're not based on facts. I mean, she's talking about the census of India in 1971 and blah, blah, blah. Well, okay, let's show up some of my own statistics. Here we go. So, this is actual census data. As of the 2011 census, this apparently is the most recent full count. Sikhs make up 57.69% of Punjab's population. Hindus make up 38.49%. So yeah, the Sikh majority is real. And it's the reason Punjab is the only Sikh majority administration on earth. But it's all about the trend line. It's not the snapshot, it's the trend of what's happening that matters. Researchers and Sikh organisations right across the board have flagged up that the Sikh share has been gradually declining for decades, driven by exactly the forces, the two forces that we discuss often on the show: heavy emigration abroad, especially of working age Sikhs, and a lower birth rate compared with Punjab's Hindu and Muslim populations. And both of those factors are growing faster. And some demographers, they're the people who count these sorts of things, project Sikhs could lose the majority in Punjab in just a few decades if the trend doesn't change. So that is the truth of the matter. The snapshot, at the moment, Punjab has a small majority, but the trend is it's declining because of all these factors. And you factor in also the deliberate agenda of Delhi to accelerate that trend, pouring in drugs into Punjab, driving the young out. There's no jobs, unemployment rates, all these push factors that makes Punjab a less and less attractive place for a youngster to stay is pushing them out. So it is the young future generations that would form the backbone of Punjab, the young Sikhs, they're leaving in large numbers. They're leaving to other parts of India, or more importantly, they're leaving Punjab to the diaspora, to overseas. And that is why the trend is declining. Delhi knows it, and it's leveraging it deliberately because it knows it can kill the Khalistan movement if there are no Sikhs left in Punjab. And as I often refer to that fact, if all Sikhs moved today back to Punjab, the Khalistan would probably happen very, very quickly, within a matter of probably a year, I've no doubt. But of course, that's not going to happen unless every Sikh feels motivated to quickly up sticks, as we say, and move back to Punjab. But in real terms, in practical terms, that's not going to happen. So, so an honest answer to the video that lady was talking about, it really is, it's the opposite of what her whole narrative is. Sikhs aren't expanding the footprint in Punjab at Hindu's expense. And if anything, the numbers point toward a slow, ongoing erosion of the one demographic stronghold that the Sikh community has left. Now, it's always worth having a bit of healthy scepticism towards any video that you see that always argues the opposite of what we know to be true. And another example of this, I've just literally, before coming on air, I saw a video from, was it Kona or HAF, one of the Hindutva video outlets that I often refer to. I might even do a piece on it next week. Talking about the Kanishka bombing. And it's the same guy who's on every single time. And he's brought some expert, talking about, in reaction to the last piece, and I talked about that last piece about the Kanishka bombing, where they'd posted up this whole piece about the Kanishka bombing. Yes, they've dragged out that same old chestnut, as we call it, that same old stick to beat the Sikh community with, the Khalistan movement with, saying, oh yeah, they're all terrorists because they bombed the Air India flight in 1985. Well, underneath that video, hundreds of people, myself included, put a comment saying, this is nonsense, it's not true. Even that CIA whistleblower, John Kiriakou, admitted offhandedly that it's the worst kept secret in the world that, of course, India was behind that bombing. It was a false flag. So, as a result of that, in response to that, he's posted up another video, I think was it today or maybe overnight, that, and he brings in an expert to say, no, it's nonsense. All these people who made a comment after the last video are talking nonsense because there is zero evidence whatsoever that India were behind the bombing. Well, actually, there is. There's lots of evidence. But again, it's just very typical that Hindutva, who are now on the back foot because the Khalistan movement is becoming so powerful and so strong and so well known and so widely supported now around the world, that they are that because they're now on the back foot, they're having to push these nonsense propaganda videos, like this lady's video here. They're having to push these videos because they realise they're losing the narrative, they're losing the propaganda war. Their propaganda is just not hitting. People are starting to realise what it is. It's nonsense. It's easy to sit there and say, oh yeah, Sikhs are pushing out Hindus in Punjab. It's easy to say that, but there's no evidence of that. It's easy to say Khalistanis brought down the Air India flight in 1985. and say there's zero evidence to say it was India. It's easy to say that, but it's not true, because there is evidence. In other words, once you present evidence, these arguments just fall apart. And this is why they are struggling. This is why the whole Hindutva movement is struggling. And they are now having to sink to increasingly desperate measures to try and regain control, to regain and get back on the front foot. But it is good to see that they are struggling. It's also good to see videos like this, because it proves the point that I keep making, that the Khalistan movement is winning. It is winning the information war. The more these videos appear, the more it proves how scared and rattled Hindutva and the RSS are over the Khalistan movement. It proves that they are having now to pour millions of dollars, as they do every year, increasingly so, into propaganda pieces to try to win back the narrative, because they've lost it. They're losing control of the narrative. So, as I say, the more of these videos you see, join in, comment on these videos, swamp their videos with the truth, swamp the videos with Khalistan Zindabad. Let's make them know and aware, not that they're already aware. Let's remind them that they are losing this war. And you can put in the comments, as I often do, you're losing this information war. You can put as many of these videos up as you want, but people see right through them now because you've lost credibility now. So anyway, hopefully that sets out clearly my thoughts on that, but I'm sure most of you guys are probably aligned with that. But let me know your thoughts on that story anyway. I want to move on now. This, I have to say, one of my favourite pieces in ages, this. I saw this video on social media. This is a wonderful, wonderful video. I'm going to play it for you now as I speak to you, because I'll let this video speak for itself. Here we go. Hang on. There we are. Combat Corps, this lady calls herself. Look at that. Fabulous. This video, it's been circulating on social media. It's this young Sikh girl. She calls herself Combat Corps. I wish I knew her real name, but I don't. But anyway, she names herself on her social media as Combat Corps. She's demonstrating a huge amount of skill. I mean, how fabulous was that? I mean, I'll play it again because it's so good. I'm going to keep on playing it, because it sets the theme of what I'm going to finish the show with today. She's performing two kirpans at once, two swords at once, performing Gatka, the traditional Sikh martial art. And it is very striking, and it's exactly the kind of thing that I always like to use as a starting point, because the strength on display of this girl has real historical roots that I don't think get talked about enough. If we start right at the very beginning, Guru Nanak, the first Sikh guru, taught the full equality of women from the very beginning of the faith, back in the late 1400s. Of course, centuries before Britain. As I always remind the world, this was centuries before Britain. Obviously, at the time, supposedly the standard of civilised progress. And we didn't grant women the vote until 1918. Centuries before that. And centuries, in fact, most of the world never extended women anything like equal spiritual standing. But that was what Sikhs did. And it's not incidental to Sikh identity, it's foundational to it. It is a foundational principle of Sikhi, to treat women as equals. So, and that principle itself produced real, genuine warriors. So this girl that I've just shown the video of, she is the latest iteration of a whole line of female warriors in the Sikh community, the Sikh people. Mai Bago, and apologies if I pronounced that incorrectly. I'm sure you guys will correct my pronunciation. Mai Bago. Anyway, this lady was born in the village of Jabal Kalan. She was trained by her father in horse riding and archery and Gatka, the swordsmanship, alongside, of course, her domestic skills that her mother taught her. And in 1705, when 40 Sikh soldiers deserted Guru Gobind Singh's army during the siege of Anandpur Sahib, it was this lady, Mai Bago, who then tracked them down, shamed them, and personally led them back into battle at Mukta against a Mughal force of 10,000. And she herself fought in that battle, was the only one of the reunited 40 to survive it. And then she went on to serve as Guru Gobind Singh Ji's personal bodyguard for the rest of his life. And today she's remembered as a warrior saint. absolute proof, if ever you need it, in the Guru's own household that courage in Sikhi was not just the sole preserve of men, is that women also possessed equal courage. Not just Mai Bagay. She's not just an isolated case. Bibi Anup Kaur, this lady, fought and helped sustain Sikh resistance through some of the worst Mughal persecution of that era, up to the time of the Sikh Empire. Mata Sundari, wife of Guru Gobind Singh Ji, effectively ran the Khalsa's affairs after his death, issuing her own official orders to reunite what at the time was a fractured army. So she expressed real political and military authority, even if mainstream tellings of that story tend to only remember her as a mother. I mean, how disrespectful that this lady actually was a very, very accomplished military manager. And of course, the Sikh Empire itself, the one that I always hold up as proof that Sikhs have governed successfully before, and thus Khalistan should be a success, had a woman as its final ruler, Maharani Jin Kaur. I beg your pardon, so this is Maharani Jin Kaur. So yeah, Maharani Jin Kaur. She, of course, after the death of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, and then his son Duleep took over. Of course, he was only, 5 years old at the time? He was a young lad. So his mum had to take over what's called the regency. So she essentially took charge on behalf of her son Duleep. And she, by every account, became one of the most formidable opponents that the British colonial power ever faced in Punjab. And so formidable that the British then deliberately separated her from her son Duleep. And of course, that's Duleep as the prince I told you about earlier in the week. But the British did that specifically to try and break her influence over him because she was such a powerful figure. And so these ladies were just some of many of the forerunners of today's iteration of this, today's manifestation of the Sikh female power that was encouraged, not just encouraged, but was obliged by the gurus from the very first guru, Nanak Dev Ji. And that really is the real thread that runs through Sikh history on this whole question. And it's worth saying plainly, there were female warriors. There were female heads of state. There was even a female voice in the Khalsa's highest councils. And all of that centuries before most of the rest of the world even began asking whether women belonged in those rooms at all. I mean, can you imagine even in the 19th century, if the British Parliament had seen a woman inside it, there would have been uproar. And yet, in the Sikh Empire, women were holding ministries of high office. So that young girl with the 2 kirpans in that video schedule, I'll play it again because it's so worth watching. She's not doing anything new. She's basically continuing Sikhi built into its foundations more than 500 years ago. She is the modern manifestation of a 500-year history of female warriors. And it's not just this girl. It runs through all sorts of different areas of the Sikh community. How about this? This came out of Solihull in the Midlands, here in the UK. Solihull Sikh community this week celebrated this young lady's fitness and athletic achievements. And again, it's exactly the modern continuation of this principle I'm talking about, that physical strength and discipline for Sikh women isn't just any sort of novelty or even an exception. It is an expectation that the faith has carried since Guru Nanak. And this girl, she's a Solihull martial artist. Her name is Simran Kaur Sawan. She's now won 39 medals on the world stage. She's a martial artist. She specialises in kickboxing. She's won 6 gold medals competing at the WKO World Championships. And she's won gold across a variety of ring and tatami disciplines. Whatever that means, apologies, I don't know, but it sounds very impressive. And this young girl, she received a championship belt at the end of the competition in Yorkshire recently, and she was named as the event's overall top competitor. And that was in a competition where more than 800 athletes from the whole world took part. And her latest success takes her career medal tally apparently to 39 World Championship gold medals. So again, Again, it's a Sikh girl continuing this warrior prowess. And it's all about this fitness and strength, this tradition of fitness and strength. And again, it's not just about looking good or winning medals. They trace back, as I said, to the Guru's own teaching that every Sikh, regardless of gender, should be capable of standing up as a defender of the oppressed. In other words, it had practical reasons. The Guru realised that the Sikh people, needed warriors to defend themselves, but as well, and equally importantly, to protect the oppressed. That was the whole reason for the establishment of the Sikh faith, amongst others, but that was one of the key tenets of the Sikh faith and still remains that today. And so ultimately, whether it's a modern gym session or a 17th century battlefield, they are in effect part of the same story. But just the gym or, the modern martial arts arena are just the modern evolutions of yesterday's battlefields. And likewise, boxing, a massive sport for the Sikh community. And I see loads about the men, but it's not just the men as it turns out, it's even women. And here in the UK, boxing has been a genuine Sikh tradition for generations. Sikh amateur clubs have quietly produced champions for decades. And this year, the tradition reached a real milestone. This lady, Sharon Kaur Desai from Hull, became the first British-born Sikh woman to turn professional after 8 years working her way up through those amateur ranks. She was a 3-time national champion, a European silver medalist, and a 3-time international champion. And it turns out she only discovered boxing by accident, because apparently she went to a local boxing gym. She stood in the doorway waiting for a younger brother who was finishing his session. And the coach, a guy called Sean Ross apparently, said to her, "Why don't you join in?" And as he said, the rest is history. And here she is, holding gold medals and belts. And what makes her story so important is basically what she says publicly, what she's stated publicly, why she fights. "I never had someone like me to look up to, so I aim to make history. I want our girls to know they can be champions." I mean, what better example than she's set herself? And former British light welterweight champion, a guy called Curtis Woodhouse, actually has said that this girl is a future superstar. And she featured a lot in the BBC. The BBC actually did a whole documentary on this girl. That's how dominant she's become. Of course, unsurprisingly, she's faced all sorts of typical scepticism, cultural resistance along the way, and of course, being female, there's always been a social sort of resistance. And I have to say, even myself with my cultural background, seeing a woman box, I find it very difficult to cope with, because I'm brought up with the culture that women are dainty, fragile creatures, which is a terribly offensive thing to say in reality. But that's how I'm brought up. That is my culture. And when I see women boxing, I mean, this girl is fearsome. She is of the warrior class. I certainly would never pick an argument with her. And it is a great tribute to women the world over, particularly Sikh women, that they have I'm going to use a rude word, cojones, ironically, to actually stand up and fight like the true warrior class that they are. And again, she's not alone. Look at these two youngsters, Leamington here in the UK also. 2 14-year-old Sikh boxers, Jaya Khalsi, Serena Mali. They've been turning heads in the junior ranks. Now, Jaya is the reigning English and British champion at 48 kilos. I mean, she's just a wee slip of a girl, as we say. She's just been selected to represent England at the European Junior Championships. And Serena has been picked up national and international honours on her own. And the coach has come from a very famous boxing gym in a city called Sheffield in the north. And it's a very well-known gym that's produced many champions in the past. And he actually said, the coach is called Edwin Cleary, he's compared these two to Serena Williams and Tiger Woods in terms of the level that he thinks they could reach. In other words, these two girls are future world champion potentials. And again, the BBC thought their story was significant enough to have a whole documentary around it. It was called Sikh Boxing Warriors. And you can see that apparently on iPlayer in the UK. So, a final one. We're running out of time, but again, as I say, I wanted to cover this story because it's such a great story. Karanjeet Kaur Bains, this lady, Again, another fearsome warrior. She became the first British Sikh woman to represent Great Britain in powerlifting at European and World Championship level. She added a fourth discipline after Gatka, kickboxing and boxing. Again, another girl I would really not want to pick a fight with. She is just one of many Sikh women who are now setting national firsts in a single generation. And again, if you put all those women I've just shown pictures of, you put them all together, Mai Bago's story from 3 centuries ago, next to Sharon Kaur Desai from this year, and all these other girls, the same tradition that produced a woman who rallied 40 deserters back into battle is now, that same tradition is producing Britain's first Sikh female professional boxer. Or girls like this, the powerlifter, the Gatka warriors. Again, fantastic. It's really heartwarming to see this. And it's great that these girls have managed to break through these sort of social barriers that have held women back in the past. And again, I always point to the irony that here in the UK, yeah, I mean, women have the vote, but it's taken even generations since that, since 1918, for them to break through into sport and the workplace and break through those ceilings. But girls like this, driven by their Sikh spirit, their Sikh resilience, and of course that obligation to the requirements of the gurus, they've manifested it in huge successful stories. And she's still going. Fantastic. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts. As I say, it's always great to cover a story like that. Right. Let's wrap up now with, let's do the comments column. Where are we? Comments. There we go. Thank you to all you guys. Loads of comments coming in, as usual. Of course, today is not a live show, so I haven't got any live comments to dip into, which is a shame. I always do love your live comments, but anyway. But as you know, I'll be back on Monday with the Live at 5 show, 5 p.m. UK time, so make sure you join me then. But anyway, let's cover some of today's comments. This is from actually a couple of shows ago. B Singh kicks us off. Your channel is always informative, Mr. Angus. Well, I do my best, but it's only thanks to you guys that I can be informative. Sad Britishers kidnap our gem of that time. Otherwise, Sikhs had our own home. Yeah, I mean, it does beg the question. And there's almost a sort of what-if question here. What if the East India Company had not annexed the Sikh Empire? What if the British Empire had stopped at that line of Sikh control? The Sikh Empire today might still exist as Khalistan. Who knows? Well, we'll never know. But yeah, it does make you wonder if, during those Anglo-Sikh wars, if the Sikhs had prevailed, again, big what if, but if the Sikhs had prevailed in those Anglo-Sikh wars, Khalistan may have been established, essentially, at the end of the 18th century, when Maharaja Ranjit Singh Ji established the Sikh Empire. And then it would evolve to today, to 2026, as Khalistan. Who knows? But anyway, it was. But yes, of course, the British did prevail, and they did their ruthless, cynical ploys, which they were very well known for. They separated Duleep from his mother, and, well, the rest is history, as they say. DTST, again, he's been very, very active on our comments. Hello, DTST. Thank you for your contributions. But it's actually, this is a good point. Why did that? Okay. So bearing all this in mind, the fact that you were defeated by the British Empire, why then did you turn round and fight for Britain? Why did 500,000 of you die for Britain if you're upset about what happened to the Sikh Empire? It's actually a good question. I mean, there are lots of different answers to that. I know ultimately what the answers are, or some of the answers. Essentially, it's because Sikhs are a martial race. They are honour bound. And it does actually, ironically, reflects a lot of British values, particularly British military values, which is why we were so aligned with the Gurkhas and indeed with the Sikh community. And why the Sikh community have joined the British Army is because actually, despite the fact we came head to head in war, which is just a natural occurrence when empires are expanding, the fact that both sides effectively respected each other and their martial prowess, their abilities as soldiers, their courage, whatever, is that they said, look, okay, well, let's join forces. Now, obviously, the British were the dominant party, but they welcomed Sikhs into the British Army as honoured guests, honoured soldiers, to fight shoulder to shoulder with British soldiers. And a British soldier sees it as a genuine honour to fight alongside a Sikh, even today, as much as it was 100 years ago, 150 years ago. And that's why it wasn't about resentment, sour grapes, or whatever you want to call it. It was about a martial race respecting another martial race. So I think that's part of it. But again, history is not black and white. It's always a bit too complicated. Now, mountain and forest, it was the British East India Company. This actually is an important point because it does highlight something very genuine here. Was it the Queen of England, ultimately, Queen Victoria, responsible for the annexation of the Sikh Empire? Or was it somebody else? Was it the British deep state? Was it the East India Company? Was it a group of greedy men? And actually, that is a very, very pertinent question. Because in fact, the monarchy, even back in the 1900s, Queen Victoria, at one stage was so unpopular, they actually thought the monarchy would fall. And it was only after the British then became a little bit more aggressive in terms of building their empire that the British people then rallied and say, actually, yes, we need a symbolic figurehead in the form of a monarch, Queen Victoria, to unite behind. Because countries tend to unite behind leaders, however originally unpopular they might have been. In times of war or great expansion, they tend to rally behind a figurehead. That's just the way human nature works. But ultimately, who was the driving force behind the British Empire? It was greedy men. It was a small group of greedy elite. And it is thus ever more. Today, all these things are driven by the greedy elite. You can look at almost every single conflict, actually arguably in history, but certainly in the 20th century, even today, the 21st century. Every conflict is in reality, conspiratorially speaking, driven by a small elite group of greedy men. The Ukraine war is the ultimate laundromat, financial laundromat. There have been hundreds of billions and possibly trillions of dollars poured into the Ukraine war. Where's that money gone? Where is that? Where is all that money? It's sitting in the bank accounts of a very small number of people. And the same can be applied to just about every other conflict, arguably throughout history. They even argue that World War I and World War II, those two great conflagrations, were essentially driven by a small group of greedy men. Because ultimately, we ordinary people have no argument with each other. I have no argument. If I was alive in the 1930s, I had no argument with ordinary Germans and vice versa. In fact, we were friends. And many Brits lived in Germany and vice versa. We all lived quite happily. We had no arguments with each other. It was a small group of greedy men who wanted power and control, who turned us against each other. And that is the nature of humanity. My 1 in 10 argument I often refer to. It is human society is controlled by a very small number of people who all fight amongst themselves, and they use the rest of us as their armies. So we all end up killing each other for the benefit of a small number of people. And that was what the British Empire was all about. It was all about wealth, of course it was. And that is what today's empires are all about in their modern forms. So it's just a sad fact of humanity that we cannot escape from because it's inbuilt into our human genetics. There are always those, the 1 in 10s as I call them, 1 in 10 average people who is genetically driven to want to control others and accumulate wealth. But nature's designed the 1 in 10s like that to drive humanity forward. It's ruthless. Nature is ruthless. So anyway, that was slightly, I've gone off on a slightly philosophical tangent there, but thank you, Mountain and Forest. It was actually a very, very important comment that you made there, and I think it really does evoke a much bigger conversation. DTST came back again. Yes, actually, I do actually have a response to this. Because DTST, you made a lot of effort in a lot of your comments. You talk a lot about the tribes and blah, blah, blah. And you came up with this comment, is it true that Maharaja of Patiala are offshoots from Rajasthan? So what was the real ethnic origin of the Sidhu tribe? So you're always questioning the veracity, to use a big word, the genuineness, as an alternative word, of the Sikh elite, Jats, whatever you want to call it, or the ruling class even of the Sikh community and their right to have a sovereign nation. So you're always picking at the whole Sikh Khalistan argument, trying to find holes in the argument. Well, this one I thought, you know what, I'm actually going to research this and I'm going to address it, because it was an interesting comment. And you did ask about the Maharajas of Patiala, and if they really do trace back to Rajasthan, and obviously what the actual origin of the Sidhu clan is. So, yeah, it was a fair question, and actually, as I researched it, the honest answer is yes. Broadly speaking, Bardic and colonial era records do trace the Sidhu clan to a figure called Sidhu Rao, and he's apparently said to descend from the Bati Rajputs of Jaisalmer in Rajasthan. Yeah. So around 1250, that's the 13th century, that line is then said to have married into the Giljat community, and a few generations later, one descendant, Phul, had 5 sons who then founded the Fulkian states, Patiala, Nabha and Jind amongst the 5. So the Patiala royal family's own genealogy does point back towards Rajasthan, centuries before Sikhism even existed. Fair point. Now, this, though, however, is oral bardic genealogy, and it is not set in fact. It's debated at great length by historians. It is not a settled fact. And clan migration across Rajasthan, Haryana, Punjab, that whole area, over the centuries is not anything unremarkable. And Sidhu itself is a gotra shared today across Sikhs, Hindus and Muslims alike. But the real question, and practically speaking, the real question is, so what? Because a ruling family's 13th century ancestry is not relevant. It tells you nothing about a modern people's identity, or indeed their right to self-determination now in the 21st century. For example, here in the UK, nobody argues that our own monarchy and its German ancestry, because they're all Germans, it doesn't make King Charles III less British. In other words, yes, you can dig up an old clan's genealogy, its descendant, to suggest Sikhs aren't really a distinct nation. It's a trick. It doesn't really stand up. It's interesting history, but it's not really the argument that I think you're trying to make it. So, but ultimately, yeah, thanks for the question. But I think it's a case of nice try, have another go, you know. Anyway, but thank you anyway, DTST. We do appreciate your contributions, despite I think some of our regular viewers getting a little bit huffy about it. Anyway, here you go again. Didn't royal Sikhs destroy each other for Sikh? I'm going to ignore that one. DTST, you've had quite enough time, thank you. This one, again, the Punjabi. Was it Vaheguru 6334? Anyway, you know who you are. Thank you for your comment. And thankful to you, sir, the cross Kirpans. Khalistan Zindabad. Absolutely right. Couldn't put it better myself. And TC's there. Hello, TC. Sadly, we're not live, so I can't see you live. But anyway, thank you as always. Always there in the comments. Much appreciated. Khalistan Zindabad and DTST Angus Scott. And unfortunately, I don't know what Banu e Lala means. I'm sure it's probably not very complimentary, but anyway, thank you, DTST. It did make me chuckle. Again, with lots of love. And again, as always, a huge amount of love sent back to you. Thank you for your comments. Robert Chapman. A very English-sounding name, but I'm assuming you're a Sikh. Well, an English Sikh. Thanks, Angus, for highlighting Sikh issues. That's what I'm here for. That's what I love doing. Keep up the good work. Well, thank you. Well, you keep up the good comments. Much appreciated. And thank you for continuing to watch. And thank you for your loyalty. It is very much appreciated. And, DTST. I just had to pop in there with a comment. And, yes, Gurmeet Singh closes off today with a Khalistan Zindabad. Indeed. There we are. Right button. Thank you. Good heavens. For once, amazingly, we're on time. I think the reason is because I'm not live and I'm not dipping into live comments. So I've actually managed to finish on time for a change. Thanks so much, you guys, for watching. The podcast with Dr. Groyle being uploaded tomorrow. Again, as always, a fascinating one. It'll be uploaded tomorrow morning UK time. Let me know your thoughts on that. But as always, let me know your thoughts on today's show. We covered a lot of ground today, but as I say, the particularly interesting story was my favourite one, this one. So let me know your thoughts about this young lady. And but of course, on any of my other stories, let me know your thoughts. That is it for another day. I will see, and indeed another week. God willing, I will see you guys live at 5 p.m. Monday afternoon UK time. Please join me on Monday afternoon. It's always great to see you live. Let me know your thoughts via email, message@satellagetv.com. if there's anything you'd like to bring to my attention, or you just want to say hello. Just pop me an email. It's always nice to hear from you guys. Much appreciated, and I do read every email. Likewise, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Apart from that, watch the podcast tomorrow. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you guys all being well on Monday.